Is that it? Are we good?
Well, it says it's setting up, but it actually does. Yep, we're done. We're there.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the SOPP, the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. And as always, I'm Kevin Bell. Fortunately, my hair is a mess and I'm doing some other things around the house, so I am without video today. But with me, as always, is the one and the only, the Betsy Cunningham. The one, the Betsy Cunningham. My
And my
co
as always, my hair's a mess, and I don't care.
host. And as always, we're going to go top to bottom, left to right, just introducing everybody who's been here today. As always, we know John Hunter, Community Rights, Douglas County. Thank you for coming in with us, John.
Oh, my pleasure.
And on iPhone 4, if I'm not mistaken, is Max Smoot of the Frog Leg Art Studio. He's doing really good. Hey, Max.
Hi.
Then Tommy is Ruth Smith, but Betsy, I think you'd like to introduce them really quick because you know them a little bit better than I do, although I have heard of you from the grapevine.
Yeah, Ruth Smith actually is going to talk about you know, the pet peeve that I had from last week, which has to do with when the hell happened to the community garden that was on Rose Street. It was there and disappeared, and nobody who mattered seemed to know about it. So Ruth is an expert. Although she's on the city council, it really started, she was one of the people instrumental in starting that garden and other gardens in the community uh, years ago, and has been a community activist and organizer, particularly in the downtown area where we. So, Ruth, you want to just start and kind of talk about the garden?
So have we introduced everybody?
Uh,
Are we,
One more
are we
person,
still
and that's Zach,
introducing?
but he's
Okay.
here all the time. He's here all
I'm here all the time.
Jack, you want to
Well, I
introduce
don't know
yourself?
Zach.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, we skipped over you. Shame on you, Kevin.
Okay. My introduction, Zach Whitworth, historian in training, affiliated with Community Rights Douglas County and also the Institute for Social Ecology in Vermont. I'll be at University of Oregon in September. Always happy to be here.
All right, so back to Ruth.
All right. All right. So my backstory is I have moved down into the Southeast Roseburg neighborhood, and we are in smack dab middle in a food desert. We have not had any grocery stores in our community for, gosh, over 20 years now. And I signed up as an AmeriCorps Vista my senior year of college and working on my bachelor's degree. And while I was working with a group of folks at NeighborWorks Umpqua, we really started looking at where we could put in a garden using city lands and city property to try to do permaculture. And while we have a lot of different parks, we felt that we needed to have something that had a small footprint. We were downtown and it was brought to our attention. There was this little brick garden on Rose Street that it was in really bad disrepair. The city hadn't been taking care of it. The Grand Residence, which is a NeighborWorks apartment complex, NeighborWorks Umpqua, and the residents had been taking 5-gallon buckets of water and had been planting flowers and were sometimes planting vegetables in this brick wall, this little garden space. I mean, they're like one by 4 foot little garden beds. And so there was very little dirt in them anymore. And we talked with the head of the Parks Department at that time. She was trying to help us identify some areas that we might be able to do a forest garden in some of the community parks and stuff. And so what we decided to do was to start off with this small footprint here in this downtown park to do some beautification, and it would give access to free food for the the apartment complexes because we had the Grand, the Rose, and the Cohagen right there. And at the time, there was a lot of unhoused individuals that were going to the Dream Center at one of the local churches. So there was a lot of people walking by, and they could graze and they could, just get some food. So several of the residents over at the Grand really got them on board and involved. And so they were weeding it, taking care of it. The Parks Department brought in the watering and irrigation. There was a group of 5 of us. One was a retired ER doctor. He gotten into blueberry farming, and so he was bringing in the soil that he had amended. So he brought all of that in. We planted gooseberries, blueberries, raspberries, grapes, huckleberries, and then we had some big trees, some kiwis, and then the residents brought in vegetables for their annual gardening for each year as well. And so they've been taking care of this for like 10 years. And the last few years, since Tracy Pope had left the Parks Department, we hadn't been getting the support from the city Parks Department. There's a lot of regulations in order to have to be able to oversee and take care of a park section. You have to have insurance, you have to be willing to take care of do cleanups and a lot of other things. Well, the residents have already been doing it for, I think, about 8 years at that point. And there's some benches that are just deteriorating. And we talked about making more garden boxes and trying to work something out, but we just weren't able to get a hold of anybody to do the insurance component pieces of it. So it I think has kind of gone by the wayside. I had a conversation this year, and they were checking into a few insurance components, and then I had several people calling me up and saying they ripped out all of the vegetation, and there's now bark mulch in there. So evidently somebody made a decision that's above my pay grade and no notification about what was going on. So that's about where it is as far as that goes. But there were quite a few residents from the Grand, and Betsy also used to go over and get food from the garden as well, from some of the big trees and some of the other things. But the food is no longer there or available.
So the one thing to me that kind of piqued my interest is nobody told anybody that I'm aware at the Grand, right? So the residents who
No.
are actually tending the garden were never notified. And I think it is important, and I know you're not representing the city council, but you are actually the chair of the Parks Commission, right?
Yes, I am.
And the Parks Commission was never consulted about this.
No.
Right?
No.
And so you weren't asked,
But in
and-
all fairness, I don't think the Parks Commission was brought into starting this project either. So, I don't think they were made aware of it. I know that we never spoke to the Parks Commission about it. So that was something, but I mean, that was like I said, back in 2014, 2015.
And so that garden has been pretty much operable. And, what really amazed me is there was a fig tree that really had come into maturity there. So they cut it down, in the peak of production of, and that was for actually what they had grapes still growing there.
One of the residents called me. One of the residents called me. She goes, I was eating grapes, then I went back out the next morning to get another batch, and they were all gone. And she says, it's all gone. Everything's just been ripped out. So she was pretty heartbroken about it.
Yeah,
So one of the,
Example.
go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I just see it as another blatant example of the fact that they've discouraged public discussion about anything. They have obviously all these secret plans that they don't disclose in any public meetings. They're not only not trying to bring in intelligent public dialogue, but they're actually sabotaging it and discouraging it. And I'm really tired of it. And I want to go to city council and just kind of like put everybody under citizen's arrest and say that I'm suing them basically in lieu
Okay, well,
of
I'm on that diet, so
being able
just,
to
you
sue.
know, make sure
Right,
you don't
right.
get me, okay?
Well, yeah, like I mean, and that's like starting with the mayor and the council and the city manager, like I think, and it's becoming like a popular thing to talk shit about the city council or the city manager, but then it's like, who's going to be the next city manager? And like, it's the policy that apparently they're getting emails that they don't even talk to the city council about or something because they're the ones that decide what's on the agenda. I mean, I remember talking about this like back in February. They're like, well, yeah, we don't have any way for the city councilors to put stuff on the agenda, not even like the head city council person or whoever it is, the leader or the
That's
chair.
me.
That's you. Yeah.
I'm the
Like
chair.
you don't
That's
even
me.
have. Yeah, that's what you were the one that was saying. Like,
Yeah.
shouldn't we have some kind of way to put something on the agenda? And the mayor was like, no, we don't do that. And that's still the policy, right? Like, you still aren't
Yeah.
allowed. Yeah, and we can't live with that.
Well, so they've developed a tier system.
Yeah,
If
no.
it has to do with policy,
Mhm.
then they'll try and get it on right away. But otherwise, it has to get to the, it gets put on the bottom of the list.
What
I
does?
mean, we still
yeah.
struggle.
Sorry.
Yeah, we still struggle with just getting stuff brought back up that we've been talking about that, we're supposed to get it back on the agenda. So
Stuff your constituents are talking about, right? And asking you to address if you're
mhm,
allowed to. And that's not okay.
right.
They're holding you guys hostage. They've been doing it this whole time. We got us citizens, I guess, have to start really sticking up for it. And I don't know, Ashley Hicks was saying that all it takes is 3 of the city council members to like vote out the city manager. I'm like, is it really that easy?
No,
might be able
it
to-
takes 6 people to vote out the city manager.
Right, yeah. So it's a little hard. I mean, it might take
So,
the people
yeah.
to come in and actually make themselves shown, which is like pretty hard to do because a lot of us are kind of not stoked about like, making a
Yeah.
fucking target of themselves among a bunch of elitist, people that run this, think they, run the place. Anyway, that's only 2 cents. Does anybody have any, does that clear?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Well, part of the role, this has repeated itself, right? I mean, we have been discussing the last couple episodes about the turf wars, right? The
Yeah.
turf, and I know that that there was engagement at the park commission level regarding the turf, but the average citizen, myself included, I was not aware of it until Zach actually sent emails to us, and this was like a week before I think the decision was going to be made. And I know that the city, sometimes staff, complain, oh, the citizens don't care, but I don't see a whole lot of effort of the city actually engaging it. And yes, I know the law requires a certain public notice of things, but when you wait until the, 2 days, or in the case of the city, usually 3 days, right? Because they produce an
Right.
agenda. But it's not public until usually the Friday before the Monday meeting. So how is the average citizen really going to know about that? And people, don't have an opportunity to really kind of understand that. And the other thing that concerns me is, why did the city decide to do this as far as the garden is concerned? What precipitated that? Who was
I do, what I do know is that there have been a lot of complaints. They feel that it's an attractive nuisance, I think, as part of it. They're getting a lot of people hanging out there. And guess what? It's the residents of the
There's people.
complexes that are hanging out there. Yeah. And, when I used to work for Neighbor Works Umpqua, because I went into resident services after my AmeriCorps, and, we fought the conception that we had all of these homeless people hanging out there. Well, the unfortunate reality is we're dealing with low income residents, and they look like they're homeless, or they're one step from being homeless. And a lot of the individuals that they know are from people from the streets, because they may have been on the streets at one point. And so that area has a lot of complaints. We've had some new business owners come in, and they want to clean it up, which is more power to you. But at least do community building. Don't one of the biggest lessons that I learned before I started working with NeighborWorks Umpqua was I had volunteered to get involved in a community survey process that was in our neighborhood, and it was a satisfaction survey. Are you happy with your neighborhood? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? What kind of amenities do you think you need in your neighborhood? And I came in with the attitude, I know what my neighborhood needs. We need more police. We need more fire service. We need all of these things that, everybody wants. And what I found out was I didn't know shit about my neighborhood, that they all felt safe. They felt secure. They felt that they had adequate police protection. They felt that they had adequate ambulance services. The few things that they did want is they wanted a grocery store, they wanted access to medical, and they wanted better transportation, which, that's what I learned. And when you've got new businesses coming in, some of the things that they want beautification, they want safety, they want all those things that they think our neighborhood needs, but that's not what our neighborhood wanted or needed. So I think it's just learning how to engage and how to build community and bring people together to actually find out what it is the neighborhood actually needs. So now I'm off my soapbox.
Well, let me add to your soapbox. One of the things they could have done, to me, if it's a business owners complaining about that, for one, you and I both know the numbers of homeless people have drastically reduced from the downtown area, as homelessness has exponentially increased in Roseburg. So, and the other thing, and this was pre-pandemic, and when there were a lot less homeless people, as before starting Housing for Umpqua, Martha, Bryson, and I were doing, working, volunteering, trying to help folks living outside. And there's always this thing, the homeless are chasing people away from business, right? And you have a few people bitching about that. And so I did surveys. Actually, I did a couple of my own surveys where I actually visited most businesses. And the only ones I really targeted, I didn't target the lawyers and the accountants, that kind of business, because I don't think that really mattered in regard to, this dialogue. They're not the kind of business that this would really necessarily impact. But, everyone there, and I found two people, that were actually hostile to folks who were living outside. And most of them didn't blame the homeless, really did not blame the homeless. And at that same period of time, I remember we'd go on Friday night and talk to homeless people at that garden area, right in that corner of Cass and Rose, Martha and I, and there'd be, folks who were living outside and folks, like I said, from the Grand and other hanging out there. And then just the next block, which is Jackson, it was full of nicer cars and people there to eat. So it never, in my opinion, ever stopped anybody visiting those residents. So the safety stuff is bullshit. Okay, it really is. It's a perception issue. But my concern as a resident, and I think that we lose the idea that a city or a government is about the residents, right? We're the ones that are we the people, right? No matter what the Supreme Court says. So it's not the business people. So if businesses don't even live here, or even in this section of town, I'm very concerned that they look at their economic needs more than they're looking at the total need of the community. Because fixing that garden would have been, Lowe's and Home Depot both have programs to help, I know, nonprofits to do those things, like rebuild those benches. You're right, those benches were, and probably the people in the grant didn't have the money to fix some of those problems. But I didn't even hear that there was a dialogue about how we're going to get this done. So if the real concern was it isn't looking the way it should, then how do we get it to look the way it should?
Well, the big thing was that when it came to putting the bricks back together, because we bought the bricks to replace them and repair the boxes, but we had to have city staff repair them. And for 10 years, it never got repaired. So, and I mean, some of the residents actually went over with paint because the benches looked so bad. They just they found some old cans of paint, mixed them together, and with some white and yellow, it ended up being a funky color. And they went over and painted them so people wouldn't get slivers, just to try and beautify it a little bit. So the residents tried to do it, but I guess you can get in trouble for vandalism by painting stuff you're not supposed to. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, in theory, that's probably true.
Well, no, I mean, Ashley Hicks got vandalism charges against her for painting curbs the wrong color, but she did.
The curbs.
So yeah, she painted a curb outside of her house because she didn't want anybody parking outside of her house. That's city property.
Well, that's a bit different. I'm just saying, if you're doing something to stop people who legally have the right to park there, then maybe you should get a ticket. But we're talking, to repair the benches because they were falling. They are now. They're still falling apart. I don't think if they were they cared about it. The city crew who in great speed took down a full-grown fig tree. They didn't bother to fix those benches, which if you and I talked about that, if you're going to talk about a liability kind of situation, and the thing about the insurance, to me, that's just nonsense. The city can carry that insurance. You and I have both been volunteers for the city, like cleaning up Eagles Park, right? As part of service organization. They didn't require us to have insurance to go there and pick up trash and clean up Eagles Park. The city's insurance covered
I think I did that through NeighborWorks. I think I got the insurance through NeighborWorks so that we could do it.
On the cleanup, I'm the one who handled the cleanups, the paperwork with the city. There was no insurance requirement. So I think that's just a ruse sometimes not to use volunteers, and I think that kind of takes away the idea that it's actually a community. There is this us versus them. There's a city staff people that are doing things that sometimes we don't like, but that again, that community engagement part, and I think that they're in just what I know about it, there was a solution to make that look better. As you said, it's tiny. It's not that big of an area. I mean, it covers half of the block on one side, right? That planner does, between Lane and Cass. But it seems to me there was a better way to have done this. And for a while there was, I remember Thrive Umpqua was supposed to be there helping with that. And
I think that was it last year or the year before, I think, that they were going to help sponsor it. But
instead now they're doing fungus table and stuff like that.
Before we get too far into it, John has had his hand up for a second. So John, you want to ask your question or say what you will?
Jump in, John.
Yeah, this insurance thing, it's become a real excuse for these government agencies to do something, because I think you're all aware of how the county used insurance because of hazardous trees and things like that they had to go in, just justification, for logging their parks. So it's, yeah, I think it's become way too convenient of a excuse, a form to justify doing things. Anyway, that's just all I had to say. I've experienced that. With the county, that they had to do it for insurance reasons. It's
Yeah. And if it's not that, it's money, and that's because it costs money and they don't have the money, they say, right? And it's always because they don't have any money, but they have money. It's bullshit. It's always bullshit.
yeah.
There's always tons of reasons why it's not bullshit, and they have all kinds of stuff backed up. So that's why we have to show, okay, we are the ones providing the money, the people, and we're the ones that are saying now in a not necessarily in a forceful majority rules kind of a sense, but in a like, considerate community dialogue, is a way to come to an answer. But the pulling all that stuff out, I was gonna say, like, there shouldn't need to be a big meeting about that either to find out how to fix it. And so this is a clear example of what is it, the kind of community engagement that they do instead, right? Which is sabotaging the public dialogue by doing this, because it's clearly an attack on public resources and public well-being, which is, I heard Val Gordon talking about, oh, we want the public well-being. We want the well-being in our city, in our public spaces and all that. And they say, yeah, it's obviously not a goal in, grabbing these plants out of here. So,
And we haven't had a parks meeting.
yeah,
The meeting got canceled, but yeah, it got canceled this week, or this month. So this next week, we should have one. And so I guess I'll be bringing some stuff up about that.
right. And it's
at that meeting.
I'm kind of saying is, like, this is the type of public engagement that they want, which is basically gaslighting the public. Because once you go back and complain, what are they going to say? What's everybody going to say? All the elitists of the public here, oh, it's just plants. Get over it. It's just a temporary thing. It makes it look nicer. It'll get rid of it. And it's just plants. And so that's exactly, it's going to be a total gaslighting bullshit. Because if you're pissed about it, it's just plants. So, and now it looks better. So get over it. Same with the turf thing. It's like, it's going to help. And it's like, no, it's going to be a melted slab of plastic in a park with a fence around it. And it's going to be, bullshit. And it's like, you can't even start to, oppose any of this in the meeting. You just get ridiculed and laughed out of there, And that's how it's fascism is what it is. It's friendly.
So one of the things that I found as being on the park and the head of the Parks Committee, is the information that I received at the meeting and that we made our decision on was way different than what all came out at the big meeting. And so, I voted one way, but then after the meeting, then I received all this barrage of information that I did not have access to prior to that meeting. And of course, we find out about what's on the agenda right before that meeting. And so, so we're really not given a whole lot of information. So it really is,
and you've got all these
more people coming to the meetings that have that, because once it gets to, once we make our ruling and then it goes to city council, by the time it gets to city council, the decision's pretty much been made. And then it's just like a rubber stamp. But Zach, he really got on and he went to every single person and talked to everybody he possibly could prior to that meeting and gave us all an earful and really educated us a lot. So I voted against it, after all the information that I received. And then even, the discussion with Tom Nicollet, I didn't know that he was a physicist. So I didn't know that he had all of that chemical engineering under his background. He laid all that out, and I have a granddaughter who is, she's in remission from cancer. And I'm thinking, I I really don't feel comfortable now. So I voted no.
Yeah,
But I had voted yes before, and then it was like, okay, I have new information. I'm I'm not voting for it.
yeah. So it's about informed voting. People don't think about that. And then, yeah, so and hence the complete like sabotage of the public dialogue. They're trying to push this stuff through. They got like these elitist, athletics people just pushing tooth and nail. Of course, it's understandable. They want to be like Medford and Grants Pass or whatever, and have tournament ready or whatever, and desperately wanting more opportunities for the kids, which, sports is, we can do a lot of sports even without a turf field. Like, think about like there's a lot of people that have achieved a lot even without it, without the turf. And so it's just like it's ridiculous that we have these people so passionate about doing this, call it bullying you into your decision. It's straight up, it's intimidation, and it's in the public, and it's constantly everywhere you look. It's like, oh, this is why we can't have nice things. We have too many poor people here. It's like it's always blaming the poor people. And it's like, wow, this is ridiculous. We need to actually think a little more about this and realize how much the jails cost. The jails are what keep going up. And then also the top level corruption and trying to do any public services. Like, oh my God, there's homeless services are just everywhere now. It's like, no, actually, the people benefiting from, the top levels of funding for homeless services are, more noticeable than the actual services. And most of it is, churches, and their whole point is to get their word out about the church, which, it's not about providing the services at all. And anyway, so yeah, that's my I'll stop now. Like business owners, landowners, and elected officials, people in charge, are the targeted audience that we need to find our comments for, not the bashing the people that are confused downtown trying to figure out what the hell to do, like.
That's a good point. It is a very good point. And just in case, people watch this and they're confused at the jump between the garden and the turf, the comments about the vote and stuff were about the turf and the soccer thing. So, because the problem with the garden is that people like Ruth were not even notified, people who actually had a stake, that the city knew had a stake in it, right? A clearer stake than maybe the general public in the soccer arena. But again, if it's being motivated by people in the business community, and I don't want to say that it is because I don't know, but I actually am going to make an inquiry of the city to find out how this actually went down. And I would encourage people to maybe go to the city council meeting tomorrow night. Is that right? It's tomorrow, Ruth, isn't the
Correct.
city council meeting
Correct.
tomorrow night, and raise this issue. And maybe I'll get up at 7 o'clock in the evening and go there myself, just to raise this issue, because I do think, again, it's a bigger problem about what our commons are used for.
Yeah.
And I saw, that garden just really the week before they tore it down, because there's not that people are not hanging out there. I'm frequently in an office that's in the Grand, okay? And I can see that as I look out the windows, that garden area. So there's not hordes of people of any kind hanging out there, trying to cause problem and distract people. I mean, they're just not there.
It's actually safer
so
to have people around as witnesses and stuff, right? Like a couple people at least. It's not like we're having mobs of people threatening the passersby.
Right. So, or any, I mean, I don't recall seeing any of the times that I've been down there in the office. And yes, from time to time, they're homeless people, but, I want people to, not forget that they're actually residents and citizens of the city.
Well, and
right?
Tiny basically lives there, or he used to, but now he doesn't
no
have
longer
legs,
does. Yeah.
So what the fuck is he
Did
gonna
he?
do? He's just down there hustling whatever the fuck he's got to do, Like you can't
Well,
What are you
Now
gonna
he's
do?
now he's over by the point, but he hasn't been
Oh,
staying,
he's still around.
at the
He's
grant.
always-
Oh, yes, of course, because our city doesn't want to solve homelessness. They just want to, play whack-a-mole or, chase
Yeah.
people around,
Well,
they think they're doing something.
can I point out one more thing? Unless you're
Yeah.
still.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, what about what about the decision to put in the ping pong table and the cornhole, receptacles over at Eagles Park? Isn't that another example of them just sneakily doing whatever the fuck they want and spending a bunch of money? It's not cheap. They just threw down a
No,
shitload of money.
that was donated by the
It sounds like-
company.
Oh yeah, a big
Yeah,
gift.
yeah. So
Another corporate.
it was
gift.
it was
Yeah.
going
Many of these
donated by.
corporate gifts go unnoticed and then completely unpermitted by the fucking public. And so what I'm gonna say is, you walk through there at night and you're used to walking through there, and I think it's fucking a tripping hazard. It's straight up like gonna
My
cause an
gosh.
injury. And if there's any fucking foot traffic, they know there's homeless people that have no, way to fucking deal with an injury like
Really,
that.
really to set you
Yeah.
off, the gentleman who has done that, he's now on the Parks Commission. I just
Who is?
approved him. The gentleman who put those, who does those
Who
things
donated
is
them?
now,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, was it
And
a
so-
corporate gift?
but-
Another one of those little, yeah.
No, but he's done it in multiple parks throughout the county and stuff.
That's
And
great.
so, but we also, he can't vote on anything that might create business for him. So I'm just saying.
Of course not. Yeah.
Well,
vote on it.
Max, that's actually a
You bet.
very good problem
It's
about the
another
tripping
it's just
hazard.
normalizing.
I
They
well,
normalize
I
doing
think
whatever
you're
the fuck
right.
they want, It's
I
and it
think
is
you're
a
right
very
about the
corporate
tripping hazard.
backdoor ass shit, Anyway, sorry for
So,
the profanity.
Well, I don't
He's a
care.
really nice guy.
I'm sure he
Let me
is.
ask you.
Yeah, it's
Let me
great.
ask you, Ruth.
Pat on the
What was putting that ping pong table and the cornhole? Did that go through the Parks Department, to the Parks Commission?
No.
Rubber stamp. Corporate.
Wasn't even brought up that they were going to donate it. It wasn't brought up to see if that was a proper use of the park.
How do you write it off if you don't have any fucking, how do you even get that as a donation if you didn't even have any fucking evidence that they did it?
I have no idea.
It's bullshit. They rubber stamp it. What about the insurance? Oh shit. We should have thought about that. Do we have insurance for this ping pong table? Who the hell even has a ping pong paddle? You can't even buy one around here. Anyway,
Actually, I do.
Well,
I do.
Glenn and I do actually have a
Walmart-
portable
Walmart
one.
has one. Yeah.
Yeah, you
No,
gotta go
we
to
actually
Walmart.
we actually have one that's to be attached to tables like that. That's actually a portable one. So yeah, some people do have them. But the cornhole, I am going to assert
Ridiculous.
that what you raised about the cornhole, because where it is a tripping hazard.
Yeah.
If somebody is walking through that park and unaware,
Especially
they
if they're
could.
sleep
No,
deprived,
I hope the city has insurance.
and they don't
for
fucking have
that
insurance,
park.
right? Jesus Christ.
Oh, are you coming to the meeting?
Yeah, I'm coming to the meeting.
It's at 8:15, the first Wednesday of every month.
Oh, that's the Parks Commission meeting?
In the
For the
morning.
parks. Yeah.
It's
No,
in
I'm
the
not-
morning.
I can only do the
Yes.
C. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
even know
but
if I can go to
Betsy,
meetings, honestly.
Betsy, if you
makes me
decide
wanna
to
bark.
come in the evening, we do have a new sound system, so Glenn can actually hear.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, thank you. That's really nice to
Yeah.
hear. That's a pleasant surprise because I have definitely heard or tried to hear what's going on and it doesn't fucking work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's for people that have hearing issues, it's a real problem,
Mhm.
just by aging like Glenn. So,
Yeah.
John, were you going to say something?
Yeah,
Yeah, your
how come the city can afford a new
Right.
hearing system when the county can't? I mean, the county's
You ask the commissioners, we have all the money, they don't. So,
Yeah.
well, that's what they
We
say.
have a higher tax base than they do.
Well,
We locked in our tax base, I think is like at 8%. And they had, many years ago, they locked it in when they froze it. So we have the third highest tax base in the state.
Hey,
So to
well-
draw from.
Why don't you donate them a new sound system to help out the county?
right. You got some money, right?
Yeah.
No,
Police.
no, we don't.
No.
No, we don't.
Well, they could move their meetings to City Hall and everybody could hear, but then they wouldn't
I
like that.
Yeah, I don't think they would do it. So, but that's a whole different show.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the
Sorry.
relationship between the county and the city. So, all right, anything else about this topic?
Well, I want to say something. I took a few notes I want to address. So there's been some nice comparison here between the Rose Street Garden and Fir Grove Park. What really struck me about the Rose Street Garden case, especially what was noted, the removal of a fig tree, is that beyond to get beyond the notion of corruption, I think it's more helpful to talk about how a bureau, a staff, an administration actually functions, how they approach projects in a city or a state. In political science, especially as of late, a lot of the discussion about how bureaus and bureaucrats will operate is according to measurable results. So when we talk about well-being, someone who works for a bureau, an office, administrative staff in, say, a municipality, when they're thinking about well-being in terms of their occupation, it is in terms of numbers, what can be quantified, what can be shown in a presentation, either to councils, committees, or to funders for grants. It's something that also shows that one is doing their job. So well-being, wealth, whatever you want to call it, the quality of the community is something that has to be legible on paper. Because of that, spontaneity in a community can very typically be rejected and stamped out because it doesn't tend to meet those measurable characteristics. If it's members of a neighborhood coming together to form and work on a community garden spontaneously, they get together themselves. They're not going through any kinds of municipal committee channels. They're taking it upon themselves to improve their neighborhood. That to a bureau, to staff in a bureau, is contradicting measurable results. It's contradicting the very way that the so-called experts, specialists who work for a bureau are expected to organize the cities and states that they are tasked with overseeing. So I also noticed this in the discussion of Fir Grove Park during the first council meeting before the special session, the proper meeting in the chamber a few weeks ago. One of the, I presume, parents or volunteers who was associated with Umpqua United Soccer Club, who was speaking in favor of installing turf on half of Fir Grove Field and fencing it off, mentioned that members of the club had approached city administrators and said, we are willing to put together volunteer crews to help maintain this park, and they were shot down.
Mhm.
That to me, I think, is another clear example of
Right.
spontaneity of local residents, people in a neighborhood or a club, taking it upon themselves to say, we want to do this. We want to take care of our city and our amenities in this city. And because it doesn't follow the precise order that the Bureau is itself expected to follow, that gets blocked, knocked out. And what it also says to me is we really do have more abundance of a lot of things in cities like ours, counties like ours, than appears in how the city is organized in infrastructure and how there's park management, uh, uh, sheltering care for our homeless population. Beyond that, um, I was actually the other day, my dad and I were talking about a friend of ours who lives on the outskirts of town. Um, Old family friends, a couple who have long had a little orchard on their property. And every year they have so much fruit and produce that if they didn't just give it away for free and ask their friends to come and pick fruit, and it would all rot and go to waste. I see projects like Food Not Bombs that's been established recently here in Roseburg that provides for free an abundance of uh, produce, among other things, that they are able to attain and distribute. Um, in cases like this, the garden being removed, and I'm still thinking of this fig tree. A fig tree in my neighborhood was cut down by its owners not too long ago. Here's an example of a form of not just abundance, but sustenance, food that is readily available basically for free, with labor of the community being put into it. But what's the phrase? Money doesn't grow on trees. Food does. And here's an
Yeah.
example of a readily available resource that literally helps keep people alive. Food that is removed for what it could be beautification, but for lack of meeting certain standards, certain qualifications by the terms of a city administration, by the terms of the Bureau. It tells me that there really is, in terms of people being fed, people being housed, perhaps, labor power that's available in this city that people are willing to put into community gardens or maintaining parks and such, that is all readily available. But because of the need to keep to certain procedure, to keep things legible and orderly for administration, that gets turned into scarcity, an artificial scarcity that doesn't have to exist.
Right.
There's another point. So on the ping pong table and the cornhole apparatus, forgetting what they're called, just a hole that was installed at the little park downtown. Um, it really makes me think of what the character of donations are in the eyes of a bureau. For a bureau, for administrators who go by numbers, philanthropy, donations, and especially what gets called investment on paper is wonderful. Here's an influx of money, resources that we're getting for free, basically. That can be shown as a boon to the city on paper. Like numbers are going up, investments going up, donations going up. certain amenities at this and that park going up, things that can be shown in a presentation. They're equated to well-being itself when it's brought down to quantity, numbers, measurable results. But that can be easily accepted without considering how that capital investment is actually affecting the community in the long run. Like that kind of capital, donations, investment, philanthropy, whatever, is yielding new kinds of material in cities like
We
ours
do this thing
that we then have to maintain long term. It might even be extractive in a sense that we don't fully understand. When we think of a donation, it's hard to grasp a lot of the time how being gifted something can in fact become a burden on our community, even in just installing something that was not really thought through, that now we in the community have to deal with and navigate. I would worry that when we are so readily accepting, we are administrators and governing officials even, when we are readily accepting investments, donations, grants, etc., it is too easy to just think of it as an improvement rather than something that could bring danger even to this community in the long run. Investment is not a one-way street. There is expected return. And on top of that, it's also not, I mean, we certainly don't live in a democratic form of administration and government from on every level, federal down to municipal. But I would hope that we can move in a democratic direction in our politics, that our cities, states, counties can be governed on the basis of popular sovereignty, the will of the people. And those kinds of investments, donations, have a tendency to break that because it's not done on the terms of people who are living in these neighborhoods, in these communities, but more often than not on the terms of those philanthropists, donors, foundations. They are expecting returns to be shown, not necessarily our community. So I think my biggest takeaway from this, again, is we have an abundance in cities like Roseburg, counties like Douglas County, and beyond. And these kinds of moves that create scarcity do not have to they do not have to be done. They maybe have to be done in the eyes of a bureau. But then I would have to question what then are the priorities of our bureaus, our administrations? Do they really align with the needs and desires of our community? I think it judging by these cases with the parks, it really doesn't seem so.
I think, and on that note, as far as the alignment of the community, the guidelines and the decisions and the vision was created 25 to 30 years ago. And so they've been trying to get that list ticked off and making all of those things that the vision was from 20 or 30 years ago taken care of. Whereas now it's going to expire and the new vision is coming into alignment or should be coming into alignment. But I don't know when any of that's supposed to take place because we still don't even have city goals. We started a goal session, but we stopped the goal session. and it all went sideways, and that was almost 2 years ago.
Wait,
So
how did that happen? The goal session
why?
got fucking stopped. I was just wondering, like, not maybe that's a different show, but how did the goal
That's a
session
different show. That's a different
get
show. Yeah,
stopped?
but
Yeah,
it's
that's another
just the
whole.
city council's goals
We don't have goals.
went sideways. But yeah, we don't have goals. So, but
Maybe that's
other
the
than
crux of the
homeless,
problem.
yeah, that's a huge crux of the problem.
Well, you don't
But
have goals
so I don't
for
want to.
solutions. You
There's
don't have
that
a
too.
goal of the solutions for the homeless. But yes,
Right.
sorry,
This
go ahead.
this is why in community rights we've
Mhm.
written up a statement on principles that we believe should be the basis of not just government and administration in cities, counties like ours, but are the basis of free government. Government that is based on the needs and especially the desires of not just a handful of people in our community, but everyone in this community.
Right.
And so I would even say with the moves to establish certain goals, even for a city council,
Mhm.
I think it would be most wise, considering that a city council is, at least in theory, meant to be representative of the public, the whole of the
Right.
public. I think the best way to come to articulate those is through real public assemblies in this town.
Mhm.
Every ward, every neighborhood, say in the city of Roseburg, having not just town halls where people show up and they talk to their ward counselors and tell them what they want, but to act as a serious caucus. People in a neighborhood coming together in an assembly could themselves decide and vote upon directly what do we want the principles of our city and our government to be. Not just something that's being decided by city councilors and commissions alone, but is decided
Mhm.
directly by people in every neighborhood in this city. It might be something like something akin to a town hall, which has been done in the wards of cities like Roseburg. But maybe 2 or 3 similar town hall sessions that function as assemblies where everybody who is there, not just counselors, get to not just deliberate, but vote on putting forward and affirming certain key principles and goals that the members of this community want to prioritize in this city's governance and administration.
One of the takeaway in listening to you, Zach, that makes me think about the bureaucracy versus the community. Because bureaucracies have a bad rap because they are what you say, and oftentimes they're looking at rules to say why you can't do this. Hey, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and put up these roadblocks like this insurance, which really should not be a consideration for community members wanting to do anything in the community. I mean, there's limits, but the reality is, if it's organized community, to use insurance as a way to stop it from happening just sounds crazy to me.
Yeah.
But and Ruth has talked about having town halls, ward, and that may be. It could start with you, Ruth. We'll put you on the spot. But that really is, even if it's just that wider neighborhood of, say, Ward 4, right?
Mhm.
And Ruth and Tommy were responsible for the neighborhood association, no longer exists, but service were really instrumental in that happening here and making some positive changes, which was about the community doing stuff, including that Eagles Park cleanup I'd mentioned earlier. That was not the city initiating anything with us. It was us initiating that. And it's our park, and we wanted to do that. And they helped with tools, right? I mean, they were able to do that. I don't know why they didn't do it for the garden, but then they're looking, if they look at ways to use that bureaucracy to stop something from happening, they can do that. I mean, there's the instrument in which to do it. But on the other hand, I think leadership is about not nixing an idea because you haven't thought of it, or, you just out of turn. um, Leadership is saying, let's see if we can do that. If that makes sense for the community, how do we do that? Not how do we stop this from happening and putting up roadblocks. And that's not just a systemic problem with Roseburg, it's everything. It really is this bloated government bureaucracy where honestly, we've given up our responsibility as citizens to let this happen, right? Because we just give it all over to them and say, oh, go to it. And then people get pissed when it doesn't go well, but it's kind of human nature.
Well,
But
I would hesitate to say that we simply give up this power. That there is an old assumption. I think it was Baruch Spinoza who really emphasized this early on, and where a lot of political scientists have drawn the idea from. But there's this old idea from the Age of Enlightenment that the authority of any kind of government comes from people, the public, relinquishing their powers, relinquishing their authority, and handing it over to whether it's elected officials or even to kings. It's an old argument going back to the 1600s. But in there are among the problems with that is that even today, I can say as someone who grew up in Roseburg, I and many others like me didn't really have a clue how our city government functioned, how the administration functioned. We had no civics lessons in our schools regarding municipal administration and government. There's hardly even a thought among many of the people in our community that this is something that we are doing, that we have given up something, that we have given up power to a government and administration. And so it's not that there's something to take back, something that was given, handed away, but I would even wager to say most of the people in our community don't know that they have given something up. We take the existing municipal government administration, and beyond that, to the federal level of the United States, we take the way things are as given. We don't even think of different forms of government, or that even an average resident citizen can be a responsible and participating member of even the city, of our own society. So I would say that it's less a matter of recognizing a power that we've given up, and more a power that we've even yet to realize.
That's fair enough. And there's a famous song that's in Sound of Music. There's a term in it, we have to be carefully taught. And the reality is, or not, are not taught, right? Because you're absolutely right. But then again, I'm going to assert that if it is an inalienable right, from the philosophy of our government, the inalienable right of humans, so we actually gave it up in one way or the it could be that we're taught, you're absolutely right. I come from an era and a different place where civics were taught all the way through high school. You had civics every single year. My children, in their school in Southern California, they all had civics at every, level. And we moved here when our youngest was a freshman in high school. And so, but then the other side, her household taught, right, was taught, the idea of the role of a citizen And maybe that's some of the things in this program we can help people start to realize, because you're absolutely right. But I will tell you, every single adult citizen, most can in fact go on the internet today and find out how cities are supposed to operate in Oregon. And although I am not a huge fan of these associations of cities, and particularly on some of the political things they do that's influenced by politics, not really good political science or public administration, but they do a decent job of explaining what a city does, what the roles of city are, who the players are and their responsibilities. And so, and there's also a wide variety of materials, but I just focus on that because it's about Oregon. Because as you know, Zach, cities are organized differently in different states, right? County, or they don't even have counties, right? So, there is a different structure in the way local government is. But that information is out there. But you're right, they don't even know that information is out there. They don't even know they have a role. But maybe some of this idea of the town halls you're talking about is also a start, right? Is having, you do have a right to have a say, that, and that this is your government. It's not just theirs, right? And I think that is the conception. I think you're right about
And I would emphasize again that when we say town hall, typically that is people people in a community showing up and giving public opinion really to typically elected officials
that.
who have this and that actual decision-making power. I'm speaking more of, well, town hall is an example of an arena in which people can come together to discuss, deliberate, and bring up key issues in a neighborhood and city. But more importantly, I think these kinds of forms can also be used as real assemblies in which people are not just coming together to give their public opinion, to share their thoughts. That is an important part of it. But also the people who are there in these assemblies have the opportunity in such a situation to cast votes, to make decisions, even if that is like an advisory advisory decision. Like it could be something as simple as a the members of a neighborhood coming together in these assembly forms, and this is still with respect to existing city councils and commissions. They could come together and not just express what they want, desire, their needs to city councilors from whatever ward or neighborhood, but they together vote and decide here are key principles that we, neighborhood, ward, think must be prioritized in the same way that, say, a city commission, the Parks Commission or something other, is a kind of advisory board. Like ultimately, city council gets final say,
Yeah.
but they are basing the decisions on the grounds of what a commission
Yeah.
has advised them to do and has voted to advise them to do. Expand that to a neighborhood, I would say.
Yeah. And so right now we are doing something similar to that right now with the parking downtown. So we have the business owners that have come together with the ward rep, Zach Wise, and then the city is also working with they're all working together to create a compromise solution for parking downtown. Still not going well, but that very same thing you're talking about is exactly what you're talking about. That is trying
not quite
to be done too.
Not quite, because there's no real resident.
I was going to ask.
That signed
No,
up
they've
for that
asked
parking, 'cause
for the residents. The residents
I
did
know,
not show
I
up.
know. Yeah, I know, but
Right.
the problem is,
Why?
it's heavily loaded by business interest and
Right.
property owners. It's really not about the citizen. I think that what Zach is talking about is really dominated by,
Yeah.
the citizenry,
yeah.
because Yeah, because if you look at the population basis, most of us fall in the category citizen, not
Yeah.
business owner,
But-
and not
but
invested in it.
Residents were invited to participate.
One seat, one seat,
What, I thought there was
one,
two.
one seat was designated
Yeah.
for that. And then Zach ended up taking it because nobody signed up.
I was gonna say,
And-
did they find
and-
anybody?
Yeah, no, they didn't.
And
So
that's a huge part of the problem, is getting people to actually participate.
well, and
I would say
but
the-
let's speak up for those people instead of asking them to participate. Like, who's gonna actually? What citizen that lives downtown is gonna try to go up against all these people that are just in it to make sure they can get paid?
We need you down there.
Well, no, I don't fucking have time. I got other shit to do. That's the thing. Unless you're gonna fucking pay me to live here, I'm not gonna give you 2 cents of my fucking opposing opinion, opposing all these elite radical, basically fascist kind of conforming people that are giving up our powers to the authorities and to the larger corrupt systems that we're obviously struggling with. Because
Well, we have not come to a decision, so it's like,
well,
Right.
and
nobody wants to
I'm gonna
make a decision.
right.
I'm gonna throw another monkey wrench into that whole concept, Max, because you're right. Because when people do sign up to be on commissions, like homeless people who signed up to
Yeah,
be
they
on
don't
the homeless
people.
commission,
Yeah, no,
they're not picked. Okay, they're not even
Yeah.
getting a seat at the table.
it's
And
It wouldn't be.
and
I
if they
know.
don't like you, they're not going to
Yeah.
appoint you there. If they think you are the opposing voice, they're gonna pick
Yeah.
somebody who's gonna rubber
been-
stamp what you say.
I have been trying to get on the homeless commission for 3 years, so you know how well that's gone.
Walk.
It
Right,
hasn't.
and you're a city council person, but they know your views about supporting the homeless and a better way to do things. That's the problem, because you're absolutely
Right.
right. Why in the hell should any average citizen spend their time? I don't even go to the meetings
No.
for the
that's why people
same
don't
damn
vote.
reason.
Well, I think that's why you and I
don't
both gave up HVAC. So
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That if you're not really actually going to listen to those alternatives and consider them in the whole, and maybe, and realize maybe that you're wrong, there's no point in the average citizen. But the broader thing that Zach's talking about, if it's not held, maybe the ward is not, I think the ward with your representative is a good idea, but I think you're absolutely hit a point, Zach, that maybe this has to be citizen move, a movement. Because I know, like in the for Housing First Umpqua, we're actually try to do a major community event in October. We've been doing a lot of research, analyzing what the city said they were going to do, of homelessness and the data and stuff like that, and going. We have somebody working on that right now, and we're going to develop our own report. But we're also going to have a conversation with people to bring them in, and whatever their viewpoint is fine, and try to have that kind of discussion. Is what is the community's solution for this? Because then if the city gets out of your way and lets the citizens implement that solution, because that then becomes the roadblock, right? That if we want to do X, Y, Z, well, then the city has these roles. But that's a way to at least create that power, some power and dispel some information.
So a couple things that I think could be considered in this form of a neighborhood politic would be that, one, really, I'm saying yes, an advisory kind of role would make sense as a starting point, similarly to commissions. I know this is also what the neighborhood councils in cities like Los Angeles do. They are elected positions, but they serve really as an advisory role. They have votes and such. They have public show up. They send the results of their votes as advice, recommendations to the city council to ultimately make decisions on. But really, the problem that we face in cities like Roseburg is that most residents of cities like ours understand that what gets called politics, really it's government. I would not myself really call it politics. The forms of government that we have are not really reflective of or respectful of what people actually want. And I know plenty of people, even in my own even in my own family, who have hit their head against a wall for years trying to make things happen in the city for the better. And they're of the understanding that public opinion does not really matter unless you are of a particular class formed as a mob.
Yeah.
You could show up to a meeting and give your public opinion, but there is nothing that holds your so-called representatives to actually taking that seriously, unless you are of a certain really class interest, and certain people on a council or commission are favorable to what you are already coming to say. And so it's not that people are disempowered, but people are born into this city and are basically disenfranchised. Unenfranchised is actually the better word. They're not disempowered, disenfranchised. They are not in the first place, and they don't understand that there's a way to exercise real political power. And so an assembly, if it's in a ward, neighborhood, needs to ultimately be, again, a decision-making body where people of a neighborhood could come together and not just provide advice. I think that could be a starting point, but have real decision-making ability, even if it is initially in that advisory role. Because when people are able to participate and make decisions, they have ownership over those processes. The town is not just something that is run by a city council, which is not necessarily reflective of the broader population of any municipality. And people are part of the process of decision making when they are voting on decisions, like our initiative and referendum system in the state of Oregon is somewhat along those lines. We directly vote on things that are put into law. That can spur people to actually want to participate in the first place who otherwise would not. But also the problem of who's actually showing up to these kinds of meetings is a real problem. I would look to today an example in Rojava. So in the area of what we know as northern Syria, the ongoing Kurdish revolution has established a confederation of directly democratic municipalities, and they're rooted in grassroots public assemblies in neighborhoods. One of the requirements that they have for any kind of important meeting is a quorum rule that holds that every meeting must be co-chaired by a man and a woman, because women were traditionally disempowered in Kurdish society. It's a quorum based on a feminist basis. All decisions, all these kinds of meetings have to be attended and participated in, voted in by at least 40%. And I think actually now it's properly 50%, 50% women in attendance. We could do that for residents in a community. We could say that there is no way for us to make a decision by our own codes in an assembly like this unless X amount of people or X portion of people who are attending this meeting are of a certain income level. It could be, I'm just throwing things out, could be number of people who are unemployed or houseless or of a certain gender or of, I don't know, resident status. Like if it's Ward 4, a certain number of people, probably the majority of people who would be in attendance of these, would have to be residents of that neighborhood. There would be no discussion, no decision making unless that requirement is met. If that's established, then you don't have a problem of if it's just business owners steamrolling everybody else who lives in the neighborhood, you have to have the requirement.
That's cool.
All
And
right.
that's like
Go ahead.
really exciting to me, the thought of that, because the placemaking is really popular. We're doing a lot of this Roseburg, branding the town. Roseburg is like a tourist destination, all these murals and stuff. It's really this identity thing is just starting to be, I think, more and more in the public, dialogue of like feeling like you are a part of something, and having an identity in your place that you live. And I think it's even more exciting when you start dividing up Roseburg into different places and just thinking, wow, these people represent this. Here's the outspoken people in different neighborhoods kind of hashing it out or whatever, respectfully, not just steamrolling, like you said. And like, yeah, it just takes a different principle and shifting values, I guess, to inclusivity and dialogue. And yeah, anyway, I had something else I was thinking.
Yeah, like we could say in an assembly like this, if it's Ward 4, we could say for us to properly host this thing and have votes, decision making in these forums, we have to have it could be what 40% of the people who are in attendance of this be residents of this ward, not just business owners who have a brick and mortar in the ward, and maybe they have to be under a certain income threshold, so that you have people who are not just on the wealthier end in the city making these decisions.
Well, most of the people in Ward 4 would meet
gonna
the
say.
criteria.
Poor enough. Most of us are poor enough. That's true. So, well, I think that, there's been a lot of interesting discussion around this. And so, coming at the time where, I put for an hour, but we've been running longer than that, which is fine. But if we don't have anything more than that, I want to just, anybody have any other topics? And I want to say, apparently, your threat.
Oh, she froze up.
Oh no.
Fine. I'm joking because I think he resigned.
Well, you froze up. We
missed
missed most of what you said because you froze up.
that
So if
last
you were
part- that last
resigning, you're
sentence.
out of luck.
Yeah, I'm actually having computer problems that actually went off totally. I went offline for a while. So I have to figure out whether it's my computer or my internet provider. But I said that, Zach was joking about tar and feathering in the Douglas County, transportation district, and then the next day the guy, there's the announcement that Ben Edeldt, resigned as the CEO of the transportation district. So that may be one
Did he
good.
get wind of it?
Yeah. He might have gotten wind of some other things that people have been discussing, but I think it may have been the threat from the Secretary of State, and it was very clear if anybody did, no one else watched the meeting for the transportation district, that they finally hired a lawyer, which it doesn't look like they had when Edeldt was giving them this bad advice. And I think I had raised that. I was, really concerned that it may even be an ethics issue. I actually had a conversation with the ethics commission on the day announced to decide whether I was going to file a complaint about him. And, they're not going to tell you yes or no. That you have to provide evidence, but in the conversation, it looked like there may be grounds to do that. Maybe really a moot point to pursue that, but I think it's good that he's gone. It doesn't mean that eliminates the trouble with the district, but it looks like their lawyer told them they needed to certify the election, which they did do, and they didn't swear in Natasha on Monday, but they will. right? Because they said that it has to be some approval of the certification, or it has to go back to the county clerk before
They're
they can
reporting it
swear
as
her.
part of the
Yeah,
procedure.
yeah. And so it looks like that, at least that issue is solved. And I think that that was, a variety of community pressure that, got wind of this and started, but now they're dealing with cuts in the service. And I know that people that I personally know who rely upon the bus system are
Mhm.
very
Me too.
concerned about, I mean, it's their only form of transportation to go anywhere. And they're even going to cut maybe some of the dial-a-ride services. I mean, it's now been referred to an executive committee that was set up by the transportation district. And they should be meeting this week. I don't know. It might be tomorrow, but I don't know when it is. But they have some deadline they need to deal with as far as, what they're going to what services are going to cut or how they're going to restructure it to maintain
Did you,
services.
did you see what the county commissioners voted on? Not to, they will not take it over and they will not help it with it in any way, shape, or form if it does go under.
Oh, the public transit
Yeah,
county commissioners is not going to take it over. Yeah,
no,
not
yeah, they're
surprised.
not going to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of course not.
So we
Uh,
lost Betsy again.
that's
So I was actually at that
Right.
meeting, and something kind of uh, something that really came to my full attention during that. We've talked about the case of Edel on with the transportation district, the rejection of election results, and that denying of the people of our community their right to their elected officials. Um, stressing his own personal preference over our community decisions. What became very clear to me in encountering him properly for the first time, this is a fascist. I say that's not my personal opinion. That is my professional opinion as an historian. Definitionally, I would say that man is a fascist. And it I think is important to take note of the thing that was reported actually in the News Review, the last article that was written on it, that he said, which
When you
was
say he, who are you
Ben
speaking
Edel.
about? Okay.
What he said was that he had accomplished everything that he needed to. And he's getting, of course, away with a severance deal, leaving our district in worse shape as a result, that much money out. But what has happened as a result of his interference in our local institutions, our election process,
Mhm.
is sowing wider seeds um, of not just doubt, but hatred of
Mhm.
not just our vote by mail system, and I would not even say election fraud as it's been called, but elections themselves, of voting itself here in the state of Oregon. And what has happened here in Douglas County has been published like in the press far and wide. Like the Secretary of State's in Oregon, Tobias Reed's involvement in this did spur a lot of headlines throughout the state of Oregon and beyond that. And it has brought about a surge in discussions about our elections themselves, about the character, not just of vote by mail, but of voting in Oregon, period. And that consequence is something that we're still going to have to be dealing with, confronting face to face here in Douglas County. Um, we're not out of danger just because this one little fascist from Tualatin is out of our town. there are still people who are directly involved with his little campaign still here that we're going to have to deal with, and a wider range of people in our community who are increasingly turning against and rejecting basic forms of popular authority, emphasizing personal preference over objective fact, and rejecting material evidence. I would say even material reality. It's a huge problem, and it is going to continue to affect local governance here in Douglas County and Roseburg, but at every level. And if we don't have now a serious answer to that, an answer to an anti-democratic mentality and campaign that's pushing hard, if we don't have a democratic answer for that, a real democratic answer for that, we're going to see serious erosion of our civil liberties, among other things, as
At
we
a
already
local
are
level. Yeah,
at the
at a
local
local
level.
level. Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
actually, maybe that should be a subject of, future conversation, is really how do we deal with that on the local, the local level? Because you're right, the people who put Ben Edel at the helm of as the CEO of the transportation district, some of them are still on that board, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and the former chair is actually one of the co-sponsors of the effort to get a petition on the ballot to stop vote by mail. And and the people in that realm of the political Republican Party, have focused attention on various special districts and local elections over the last several years. Even their presence on the transportation district really appeared to be a concerted effort to take out Democrats who were on that board at the time and who were there initially in the founding of the district. So you're absolutely right. This is something that we have to figure out how to counter. And, I think the idea of the populist message of how this system is about everyone, right? Not just any side of any political spectrum.
Mhm.
Do you think we could get a couple different clerks? I mean, like Dan Loomis and some of the other. Did I get the right Loomis this time?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay. Or from a couple different counties to be able to come and discuss their industry to show how safe it is and to really promote that.
Well, so I would say that would be fruitless, because when we are dealing with, in the case of Ben Edel and that tendency that he is demonstrative of, representative of, it is rejecting evidence. So you could present arguments, you could present sources, you could bring on the experts in these particular issues, but those are not going to do the trick. You might be able to better inform people who are already
Informed.
who are already not really concerned about election integrity for one thing. Um, the people in our county who are and beyond, who are really pushing back against voting as such, are not going to take arguments about regarding evidence of whether or not this is our elections are safe and their integrity is protected or not. We need to have discussions based on principle, I would say. If we're limiting it to discussions, what kind of community do we want? What do we have? What do we want? Do we want people to be part of their governance, administration of their own communities or not? And I would say that a way that we could also counter that tendency is by providing these newly created, really, democratic forums like a neighborhood assembly, where people are not just casting ballots and sending them through the mail, but can actually come together and be part of a democratic process that can give people not just faith, but real, solid, concrete confidence in not just existing elections, voting, but in democratic processes, democratic politics, real politics themselves. That's the thing that I think is desperately needed. Like, we need to answer an anti-democratic tendency with democracy, not just, well, things as they are totally fine. Yes, evidence is, sources, bringing on experts is important, but that's not gonna solve the problem. There's no harm in having those kinds of officials brought onto a show like this for discussion and talking about the process. But we can't kid ourselves into thinking that doing that to the nth degree is what's going to actually curtail this tendency against voting as such. We need a concrete answer, and that, I think, is only going to be a real democracy. And I think it's also easy enough to be pessimistic or cynical about it, considering the state of things in the United States at the moment.
There's no doubt about that. There's people who are really, they don't trust anything that's said, period, regardless. And I'm seeing that a lot of that is like, why would we trust the Secretary of State? She's a Democrat. Why would we trust these people? But I think for our community, we did in the past, I think the last time Trump was in office, we had Dan come on and answer questions for the community. And then we were able to then share that information out because we had a link and we were able to promote that, check this out. This is the process. This is what he does. This is how it's done. And all of that in order to show that there is continuity in our system. But I think as it is right now, nobody believes any one person that says anything. So I think that's the hardest thing that we have to overcome. It's just because they think he's not even a Democrat, but
no, he's a Republican,
he's a Republican.
And was appointed by the county commissioners. Right. But
Right.
there's this, division among the at least two entities in the GOP locally that, are struggling with each other. And then the other side though, Zach, there's like 32,000 non-affiliated voters. Right. And so from, the idea of populism, which is where the show came out, is the idea is we're probably, there are people we're not going to convince. Right. We get that. Yeah. We have to accept that reality that they're not going to believe anyone says, particularly if they have, some label that they perceive, apparently we're pathological liars.
And those guys are the loudest voices.
They are. But the problem is, you also know, is that big swath of non-affiliated voters are the ones less likely to vote or to be engaged. So at some level, even trying to say, well, listen to the secretary, listen to Dan Loomis, I don't think so. They're not going to listen to that. I mean, geez, they don't want to vote. They're not necessarily going to, give a shit about how the voting process is. But I think that the assemblies, right, where you start talking about issues that matter, the economy, right? There are things that the average person is more concerned about how they're going to pay their bills or whether they can buy a house or, whether whatever financial need is met, than they care about who's running government, right? That's a sad reality.
Yeah.
It's the little park that was producing food that's going to make my grocery bill a little bit lighter. Well, I also have access to stuff.
Yeah. and also provide some kind of also, I mean, it's funny how they seem to have responded to some emails or some citizens saying, I don't feel safe or something, or it's not beautiful enough, or, and then so they responded by taking out the mutually common thing that everybody kind of believes is making it more of a friendly space to be, or like a beautiful, something that has actually something planted in it versus.
Mhm.
And then not to mention, yeah, it's not even like necessarily about, oh, I saved some money because I got some grapes. It's more like we have a mutual resource other than just air and concrete, It's like, yeah, everybody has enough air and concrete and, hard surfaces to sleep on or whatever. But like having like, other life forms like planted in the soil, Anyway, not to beat a dead horse, we've already talked about it, but yeah, I'm starting to think like maybe I could just try, being, if you guys really need somebody who's a resident to be on the fucking parking council, I might jump on that and just try to see, try to get my unadulterated, opinion or whatever, and just see what happens. See if I get kicked out.
Yeah.
Well,
I won't
you're
get kicked
both
out.
are, well, for this area, you're both a resident and a business owner,
Right, and
right?
that's kind of an interesting perspective that they might or might not listen to or care to,
Well, Zach is,
stand.
Zach Wise is also a resident and business owner as well. So,
But he's also like the person that spearheaded the whole project, right?
no, I did.
Oh, you did.
I did. They put me in charge of the initial one, and then when I brought the perspective back to the council, they decided that wasn't good enough, so they started over again.
Yeah, this is the third iteration of this parking discussion, okay?
Yeah, and
That we
and
wasted taxpayer dollars on, right? Because it's the staff that gets
50,000.
paid to do all the work for these committees. and
Who's getting paid to
commissions.
do it all?
The staff, the city
Right.
staff,
So
they're
yeah,
doing
they get
this,
the $50,000, right? They're like,
right?
yeah, do it, yeah.
Well, that's in addition
Oh,
to
no.
whatever we're paying the ACE
Yeah.
the ACE, the contractors on the parking. I'm
Right.
talking about city staff, instead of them solving homelessness, are now trying to do the third write-up of a parking plan for 2 blocks or 3 blocks in downtown Roseburg. I mean, if it didn't cost so
Basically,
much
just for the
money,
3 blocks.
yes.
See, I thought it was more
Yes.
complicated. Like, who's gonna clean up the parking garage, or who pays for the signage and shit? But this is about
So
2 or 3
but-
blocks in the policy of how to fucking ticket people for parking, because people are still getting
So-
tickets.
You don't want me
No.
to go into detail.
Right. I'll have to join the meeting. and
That's
figure-
a
'cause I
whole
gotta
show
figure-
on its own. And there's a lot of soapboxes in the room right now. Or
Yeah,
at least
sorry.
I'm on one of those. So do we have anything else, that's interesting about, related to Douglas County before we go? Anybody have anything
I
else?
just show up into 2 different shows.
Pick up a copy of the Frog Lake Studio newsletter. Get all your
Oh,
updates on the Frog Lake perspective and
Well,
more.
I'll be sending
other
my
people.
husband down to get a T-shirt from you, that's for sure. With
cool.
the advice thing.
Word.
John wanted us to make sure we shout out at the presentation on Palestine this Thursday coming up at the Roseburg Library, hosted by Community Rights Douglas County. Can we talk about Palestine? Featuring Julian Gomez. Go check it out. It's a really good time. We had a little bit of it here on the show. Fortunately, I didn't get to check all of it out, but I know it's a good time, and I know Julian knows what he's talking about, and he's hoping to get everybody to insight and interact with the speaker.
There it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So Max
All
is
right.
showing it. It says 6 p.m. Thursday the 28th at the library.
Perfect.
So anything else?
Also, the Homeless Herald's out, 2nd edition. Sorry.
Oh,
What-
yeah,
what
it's the
were we gonna say,
second,
Zach?
it's the Homeless Herald. It's actually the Justice edition. These are special editions.
Okay.
And it's the second one that we put out specifically addressing the rights of folks who are living outside and what they
So,
can
yeah,
do and
print
and
media
trying to
It's very much alive in Douglas County. Or
Yeah,
Roseburg.
trying-
Maybe we need to do an ICE one,
Ice.
how to deal with ICE. We
Yeah.
have a lot of our folks that plant trees are immigrants, undocumented immigrants. So yeah, so our forest industry is going to be impacted pretty hard if they all get shipped out.
Right. And they're already,
So-
what I've heard is a lot of them are very intimidated and don't really want to be around anymore. So there's a huge
Right.
shortage anyway. Food work,
Right.
farm workers, everybody like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the,
Yep.
the havoc that it's causing mentally is even worse than, I haven't really heard
I
of any
think-
abductions locally yet, but like, it's mostly
Yeah, I
people just
think-
thinking about it. Like, what the fuck? When's it gonna hit? What's gonna happen next? Spontaneous decisions, like you're saying, Zach. Anyway,
Speaking of that,
Um,
if you have any neighbors who you know are intimidated and scared presently, talk to them, get their phone number, and tell them if anything happens, you call me.
right.
Our neighbors need advocates.
Yeah,
They
that's a
do,
really
and
good
we have
idea.
and we have resources, and actually it's a good idea. There's little cards for the next Frog Legs is to put one of those cards out. It's what you do, and they have it in English and Spanish, and it's a template. You can just copy it and put it out because actually the local Democratic Party office has some of that information. And I do know in speaking with somebody that is connected in the Latino community here that the people are afraid, that
Mhm.
even like the demonstrations that have been happening on Garden Valley, I was asked well, do they take people's name? Do you have to tell them who you are to show up there? So even if they're citizens or even if they're here legally, they're afraid that somebody's going to target them. So it's not just those who are undocumented workers that are afraid. It's anybody who's brown enough to, be concerned that they're going to be targeted by ICE.
And anybody who
Anyth-
identifies publicly as an ally to the disenfranchised.
Hey, so do you
Well-
guys think our Olympics are going to be boycotted?
Oh shit.
I think that would be the biggest FU to Trump.
Right.
It's the other countries boycotted America.
It's
Yeah.
possible, but there are I mean, even thinking of say Europe alone, thinking potential tourists who would come to the United States for the Olympics.
But they're
Europe's a bit-
talking about reducing it just to the athletes, and the families won't be able to come. So there's already that discussion.
Yeah.
It's like
Um,
I think Gavin Newsom just needs to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't get workers. We can't build the arena." But
I don't know. I think he'll still be open to it. I would be more skeptical about the success of the World Cup because
that would be interesting.
the World Cup, especially in soccer being the most popular sport in the world,
Mhm.
and the events partly being in Mexico as well. I would expect that there will be immediate attendance troubles with that, potentially. Hard to say though. People still like sports and will prioritize that even over rejection of regime.
Getting ejected to a third world country.
That's yeah. Well, and that maybe what we should do is have a political football team. We can organize sports and you can talk politics. Or government, as you say, Zach. So you can so you can incorporate that into something people actually want to do. But things like liberally drinking are things people want to do, so you might want to show up there too. That's a different kind of sport. Anyway, I digress. So if we're kind of done for this,
One
So I'm
final
gonna-
word. One final
Yeah.
word is for anyone who's tuning in, who's feeling cynical, pessimistic, who is afraid. I want to reassure everyone that we are living, yes, in probably one of the scariest, darkest times in US history. We're in very unprecedented conditions in world history, considering the kind of force that is behind the federal government. But at the same time as that is the case, there is a democratic movement that is taking shape and is fighting back, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And we can be part of that movement. It is happening in our neighboring cities, even here in Oregon. It is happening across the country. It is happening far and wide. It is happening in the Middle East. I mentioned the Kurds in Rojava earlier. There is a revolution happening in the strangest places you could think of on the planet. Democratic, municipalist, socialist movements that are not trying to establish necessarily another USSR, but real, principled, democratic, free societies in which people in every community have the power to control their own lives and to establish an ecological, feminist, pacifistic even society. Some places still should defend yourself. But there is a movement. There is real movement on this planet against developing fascism and new forms of totalitarian rule. So, what's the thing that Joe Hill said before he was shot by a firing squad? Don't mourn, organize. And educate yourself and educate your neighbors, educate each other. We're all in this together. And hey, we're humanity.